we are on to the second part, which is dry goods that I keep in the pantry. So again, super important to have a lot of things on hand, because that's how you can get really creative with your food. When we just do these random shops here or there to the supermarket and we just buy sort of just a handful of things to make one meal, first of all we spend way too much money and food becomes not an enjoyable experience like cooking doesn't. So when we have a lot of these things on hand, we can just be a lot more creative, just really start getting into the whole nurturing and nourishing process of feeding ourselves and our families. So again, all of these are dry store, like I said. That means they can hold for a really long time, so there's no reason why they can't be at home. I also choose like these clear containers which are nice and airtight. Try and have them in a darker place if possible so they hold for longer as well. So we'll start with, this is a soup mix, so I use this for things like minestrone, which are quite easy. So there's a number of different little lentils and pulses and things like that in there, and some barley as well. So this is, I'm also use this when it gets colder and it's sort of in the winter months. So, but it's really great to have on hand. This is steel cut oats. So I only really use these when it gets colder as well. There's a really amazing recipe that I make in the slow cooker with some overnight steel cut oats. So tasty, so good. So steel cut just means that the whole oat hasn't been rolled, it's just been chopped almost in half or in thirds, so not very processed at all. So that's a really great one to have. Again, more so for the winter months. So these three here, this is coconut sugar. Highly recommend coconut sugar. So getting rid of all refined sugars is one of the best things you can do for your health and just for your whole life, really. You'll feel so much better. It's actually nice just even knowing you don't have these sorts of things in the house at all. And by not having them, it means you're not consuming them and your family won't actually even want them anymore because you have all these amazing substitutes. So coconut sugar is a really great one to use. So I pretty much just use it for baking, really. I use liquid maple syrup for things like on tops of porridge, or also when I bake as well. So, but this is the dry version of the sugar that I use now. Coconut oil is a definite staple. So there's a lot of talk and confusion about oils to cook with, what to do, what not to do. At this stage, I cook with coconut oil. I also put it on veggies and things that I roast. So this is the cooking one, and then this is a really high quality, beautiful olive oil, which I highly suggest having one on hand as well. I usually just use these to drizzle over things and to finish off a meal. So a cold pressed extra virgin olive oil is highly recommended. But I don't really cook with olive oil, so just the coconut oil. Lentils, these ones, so lentils, pulses and legumes are like sort of, there's a lot to it. I've made a whole separate blog post about them because there's quite a lot to say about them. Lentils are really amazing. They're so nutrient dense. There's so many amazing colors and flavors, and even though they are quite bland actually, but they all have a little bit of a different flavor to them. If you are sensitive to lentils, please give them another go, because a lot of people just overdo it and have way too many, way too quickly if they're transitioning to a plant-based diet, or they think they're doing the right thing, and it's just, your body can't process these if you haven't been used to them. And also just don't overdo anything. That, you know, that's a common rule. So please give them another chance. In terms of other ones that I'll go through, these are probably some of the easiest ones to digest. So these are red lentils. These don't need any soaking. They can cook very, very quickly. But any lentils and any beans, I always rinse them. You'll see that there's quite a bit of like just residue things that come off it. So it's just nice to rinse them, and any other legumes and beans, I would always suggest soaking them. So rinsing them first, soaking them at least for 8 to 10 hours, if not overnight. I just usually have them overnight just to get it done and make sure that I can prep for the next day. So these ones you don't need to. I use these in, you can make beautiful dals with these. You can add these into rice as well if you want to sort of pair two things together. Sometimes I do that, or I add things like quinoa to rice. So it's a really great way to just add an extra texture to the rice and also get more nutrients into it, especially if you've got kids or something like that. this makes a really beautiful lentil bolognese as well. So this is a great one to have. Zali has this one a lot too because it's quite easy for her tummy to process. So the thing with red lentils is that it doesn't have, it's had its like protective coating sort of taken off, like it's been hulled, you could say. So that's why it can cook very easily. Rice is a big one. There's so many rices out there and it can get a bit confusing. Basically, I would suggest a basmati, a white one or a brown one. So this is a brown basmati. Basmati is an Indian style rice. It's quite a long grain, and if you have played around with rices before, you will know that this one, it cooks quite quickly, I guess you could say, and it's so easy to digest. So for the gut, this is what I would strongly suggest. So basically when it's brown, it means that it hasn't been processed, so it hasn't had its like outer sheath sort of taken off. So a lot of people say that's much more nutrient dense. Then people also say, I don't think I have the other one here, yes I do. People also say that it has like particular things like phytic acids and stuff in it which can actually prevent certain minerals being absorbed. So if you have any gut issues, I would probably suggest the white basmati rice. If you are feeling pretty good in your gut, I'd go with the brown basmati, but you can always mix them up, and please don't feel like this has got much less nutrients like this white one. Basically at the end of the day, it's what you can digest. If you're eating the most amazing high quality, you know, untainted foods, if your gut still isn't strong enough and can't process things properly, then it doesn't matter. You're better off having something that your gut can process really easily, which means you can absorb so much more energy and nutrients from it. So they're my two with rice. Obviously there's so many out there, but that's just my personal, you know, opinion about those. And that comes from a Chinese medicine background as well. So we talk about rice a lot because it is a very strong staple food for our digestive system, because it can get so, be so gentle and be so easy to digest if we choose the right ones. This is Nutritional Yeast, which is a pretty amazing product. It is not like a normal yeast, so it's not like Candida related or anything like that. This is very different to that. So this is basically vegan heaven. If anyone has moved to a plant-based diet, they'll know about Nutritional Yeast. So this is a great cheese substitute for us. Regardless if you're plant-based or not, the Nutritional Yeast is a really beautiful product to have. It's so easy to use. Dairy isn't great for anyone anyway, that's a whole nother story, but just you can start making a few little transitions and feeling comfortable to add this to your meals. So like I said, you can make cheese sauces with it. I just had a soup, a minestrone soup, which I add that to, which in the past I would have added parmesan to. You can use it in sort of savory cooking, I guess you would say, like I make things like rosties or stuff like that with them, or like patties or anything like that. And obviously on pastas I use that too, so that's a really great one to have. Dogs love this, so I put this in Zali's food too. My beloved oats, they're pretty important in my house. So I never used to like oats, and that was just because they weren't ever cooked very well for me, not by my family but from friends that I used to have sleepovers at. And so we thought with our German background that oats were just not very nice at all, but they're actually amazing. I highly recommend getting whole rolled oats, so don't get the cut ones that are the quick oats or anything like that. You've got an extra 2 minutes in the morning to have a whole food still and have something that's been less processed. So I do suggest the whole rolled ones. I even use them in baking and things like that. You can do so many things, from your own mueslis to porridges, you name it. There's really a lot you can do. Things like fruit crumbles, like apple and pear crumbles, rhubarb crumbles, all of that sort of stuff. So there's a lot you can do, and oats are such a beautiful staple ingredient for the morning. There's so many things you can do with porridge, so I highly recommend these. These are chickpeas, which are also such an amazing product. I highly recommend getting familiar with chickpeas and starting to use them more. So you can, like what I said before with any legumes, I always suggest rinsing them and soaking them overnight. Chickpeas take a very long time to cook, so the more you can soak them, it can also take that protective layer off, which can help us digest them better and make sure we can absorb nutrients better, because that's their protective coating that these sorts of products have, legumes. And the longer you soak them, the less you'll need to cook them. So I make everything from hummus to put them into curries to put them into warm roast veggie salads. Just trying to think. There's really, there's so many things you can make with them. So you can even bake with them. There's so many amazing things you can use. Because they make quite a creamy and dense sort of consistency, they're really great for things like batters as well to make baking. So these are dry still. I do sometimes use tinned of these beans and things like that, especially chickpeas. So it's okay to do that. It's not a bad thing. Some people say they don't digest it very well when it's from the tin, but that's just an individual preference. Obviously, they're not in their whole form as much as like a dry legume like that is. But if you're going to take it from the tin or use a tin, make sure it's organic and it's BPA-free lining. These are yellow split peas, so they're really amazing as well. They make an incredible dal. So dal is an Indian sort of curry dish, which is so gentle and so it's like a big hug. It's really beautiful. So I highly recommend these. Really delicious. I'm just trying to think what else you could. I don't really use them for anything else, but I mean, you can obviously try and get creative and learn more things to do with these products as well. These are called Buckwheat Grouts. So grouts means that it's in its whole form still. Buckwheat's a really amazing product. I never really realized how beautiful it was. They've got a really special little shape as well. So grouts, again, is in their whole form. So I use whole form and also I have a flour, which I use. But these, you can make so many amazing things like little seed toppers. I put them with maple and bake them and things like that, and then they get really crispy, and I sprinkle them on things like granola and stuff like that. I also blitz them up and make them for things like bliss balls sometimes, not so much, but mainly cooking and baking. Baking with them is a main thing I use buckwheat grouts for. If you are gluten sensitive and you don't have oats, if you're really, really sensitive, even though oats don't usually have gluten, but some can be contaminated with it, you can have buckwheat. You can even try and blitz it down a little bit and play around with making oats from this, and also quinoa flakes is really yummy as well. And here's quinoa. So there's a few different types. This is a tri-coloured quinoa, so there's black, red and white in here. I don't probably use quinoa as much as I could or should, but I go through phases with it, to be honest. But I have found when it's just on its own, I don't really like it as much. I do like putting it in with rice, for example, or quinoa salads are really yummy. It actually holds a really nice flavour when you put a good dressing on it, like tahini dressing or something like that, with some nice veggies in it too. So quinoa is that, and I'm just trying to... Oh, sometimes you can make things like patties and stuff out of it too, which is actually quite nice. So that's quinoa. And like I said, the flakes are a great oat substitute. Pasta, so I use actually a San Remo pasta mainly, and that's probably one of the only things I buy from like the mainstream sort of supermarket, I guess you'd say. You don't need to buy the San Remo one, but this is called a pulse pasta, which is, it has peas, chickpeas, lentils, and borlotti beans. So that's the only ingredients it has in there. It's amazing. It means you can still have pasta without having like that food coma sensation, without getting bloated or anything like that. Don't overdo it, obviously, if you're just bringing lentils into your diet. So, you know, you wouldn't have this and have like beans for breakfast and lunch as well. That's like too many lentils. So you just need to, or too many legumes, just pace it. So pace it throughout the day, whatever meals you're having. But other than that, this is a really great way to get some high nutrients into what was just a standard pasta meal, and before would have maybe just been wheat. This is going to be a great substitute. So there's so many other types out there as well. This is just the one that I've preferred because some can be a bit gluggy, and this one isn't at all, so that's why I get that one. we have rice noodles as well. So these are great. They're just dry straw. They're going to hold forever. They're just really easy to use for so many things. So you can make things like, you know, like a linguine pasta, or you can make Asian salads, warm salads, coolers, or like cool sort of fresh salads, I guess you could say. There's so many things you can do with them. You can make latkes. So rice noodles are probably one of those things that, even though you might not use them all the time, it's great to just have on hand because you don't know when you might need them. And especially if people have like other allergies to things, rice noodles are a great substitute. I usually have more of these, but they're just in a smaller jar at the moment. So these are just little black beans. So I usually have all the beans, pretty much most of them, like mung beans as well. I don't have any at the moment. Kidney beans. So they all count for the same, like what I was saying with the chickpeas. You need to rinse them first and then soak them in water for at least 8 to 10, if not overnight. 8 to 10 hours. We'll go. These are really beautiful little black lentils. So there's actually even smaller ones to these, which are called French ones, but these are still just the little black ones. Super yummy. You can make really nice Indian dals and stuff with them as well. Or you can just cook them as is and make like a warm salad out of them or something like that. You can make patties out of them. The red lentils are really great to make patties as well. So there's so many things you can do with lentils. They're a great meat substitute because they're really dense and quite hearty, and they give you that really beautiful, like full feeling, but it's a really comfortable digestive hug, I guess you could say. And like I said, just they're great for having almost like slow released energy, if that, you know, just making sure that the digestive system is really comfortable over a long period of time and you feel really nourished from a meal. So that's why legumes are so popular. And again, they're so cheap. Like you can feed so many people with just a few lentils, so because they swell up so much. This is a wild black rice. I don't use it that often, but it is nice to just have something a little bit different. If you want to spice up a meal, you could make like a normal rice and then just add a little bit of this to it as well. Quite often this will leach out some of its colour and the white rice will be a little bit black, so just be careful. But you could even just make like a wild rice sort of warm salad with some roast pumpkin and some herbs and things like that. Or you could make like Asian sort of meals. So it's just nice to shake things up a bit and have something a bit different. These are Soba Noodles. There are ones that don't have wheat and they're usually a little bit tricky to find. These ones do have wheat, but if you're gluten sensitive, then obviously check for the other ones. These are really yummy because you can just, sort of like the rice noodles, you can do a few different things. You could use it as a pasta substitute or make like warm salads with them as well. So they're nice to have. And I don't have very many flours, but the ones I do have are buckwheat. What I was just saying before, I use this a lot in baking. I don't use a high amount of it. It is a little bit bitter in flavour and it can be a little bit dense and heavy. So just be careful when you're baking with it. Quinoa Flour, which is a new one in my house, so I'm excited to use that more. And this is potato starch, so just ground down potatoes. I don't use this very much, but when I do, I'm glad that I have it at home. I sort of flour things like tofu or veggies. A really nice cauliflower dish actually that you can flour and then just dust it and then pop it in the oven and it will get nice and crispy, and the tofu gets really crispy in the pan. So they're pretty much all the things I have in my pantry, and I highly recommend a lot of these because like I said, they hold for so long and you can make so many beautiful things from them.